Data deduplication, which most people call dedupe for short, is a Windows Server 2016 feature that reduces the space actually used by data. It actually looks for redundant chunks of data, and it only stores a single copy of any chunk that's redundant. Depending on the type of server you run this on, you can save as little as 10% of space. You may be able to save as much as 90% of space. Just depends on how much redundant data actually exists on the server itself. To take a look at how this actually works, I have a file, file 1. Now, many people hear the term deduplication, and what they understandably assume is that deduplication looks for files that are completely duplicate. While you may have some files that have simply been copy and pasted from one place on a volume to another, most files are actually not duplicate files in their entirety. What is far more common is that someone has taken a spreadsheet or a Word document and they may have made some changes to it. So they added a few lines at the end of a document. Well, now the document itself is not actually a duplicate document, but much of the data in the document itself is actually duplicate. What data dedupe actually does is takes files and breaks them up into smaller parts. Then it looks for duplicate chunks of those files. Now the files themselves are broken into sizes that are 32 kilobytes up to 128 kilobytes. So essentially every file is chopped up, then it looks for duplicate chunks of that data. An example, my file 1. Now we can say that's a spreadsheet or a Microsoft Word document. That file has been broken into 3 parts, A, B, and C, and those parts again would range in size from 32K up to 128K. Let's say a user made a change to that file. Once they made the change, they click Save As and just save the new version of that document, but the old version still exists on the same volume. All they did was edit a few words, so they did some proofreading, made some corrections. The majority of that document may still be the same. What data dedupe will do is break that up, and it's going to look for any duplication between file 1 and file 2. So in our example here, I'm going to say file 1 had parts A, B, and C. File 2, part A is exactly the same. We'll say 2 of those chunks have actually changed. D and E have had changes made to them. Well, when you run deduplication on a volume, what it actually does is it creates this chunk store. When data deduplication runs, it identifies duplicate chunks. Then it compresses them and moves them into the chunk store. So here, you can see A, B, and C are all the parts of file 1. When you look at file 2, the only part of file 2 that is duplicate is the A chunk. In the chunk store, it will not store a second copy of that A chunk. It knows that that's a duplicate. So what it does instead is it only stores the D and E chunks in the chunk store. Let's say this was 100 kilobytes in size, just the A chunk. Well, now with deduplication, just that one file has saved me 100 kilobytes in size by storing only a single copy of that in the chunk store, then compressing the entire chunk store itself. Now that's one file. Imagine if you ran that on a file server that is containing several hundred gigs of data, maybe a terabyte of data. Your savings could be significant.